Get your filthy hands off me! I bought this ticket! The scream shattered the sterile calm of the first-class cabin. It wasn't a cry of entitlement, but of sheer, terrified dignity. "Sir, if you do not comply, we will treat you as a hostile threat," Danica screamed back, her perfectly manicured finger pointing like a loaded gun. There was a sickening thud, the sound of a 70-year-old body hitting the industrial carpet. A collective gasp sucked the air out of the Boeing 357. Then the sound of fabric tearing. Silas Waverly, a man whose name was etched on the building they had just departed from, was being dragged by his ankles down the aisle like a sack of trash, his eyes locking with the terrified young flight attendant who had tried to save him. The camera phone in row 4 recorded every second, and the world was about to catch fire. The rain at John F. Kennedy International Airport was relentless, drumming a chaotic rhythm against the massive glass panes of Terminal 4. It was a gray, weeping afternoon in New York, the kind that seeped into the bones and made the joints ache. Silas Waverly adjusted the collar of his wool cardigan. It was a good cardigan. Cashmere, vintage, well-loved. But to the untrained eye, it looked like something fished out of a donation bin. There was a small hole near the left cuff where his late wife, Eleanor, had once spilled hot tea. He rubbed his thumb over the imperfection. It grounded him. At 72, Silas moved with a slow, deliberate grace that many mistook for frailty. His skin, the color of deep mahogany, was mapped with wrinkles that told stories of hard labor, harder decisions, and the quiet, crushing grief of the last 2 years. He stood in the boarding queue for Etheria Airways Flight AE409 to London Heathrow. The line for Group 5, Economy, stretched back toward the duty-free shops. Silas held a boarding pass that read, Seat 34C. He could have been on his private Gulfstream. He could have been in the Delta One lounge sipping aged scotch. He could have been anywhere but here, standing on swollen ankles, waiting to board a plane he technically owned. 2 weeks ago, Silas's holding company, Waverly Dynamics, had quietly completed a hostile takeover of Etheria Airways. The ink was barely dry. The press release was scheduled for tomorrow morning. No one knew. Not the board, who thought they were merging with a European conglomerate, and certainly not the staff. Silas wanted to see the rot for himself. He wanted to know why Etheria's stock was tanking and why customer satisfaction scores were in the gutter. He reached the gate agent, a harried young man who didn't look up from his screen. Silas scanned his ticket. It beeped red. "Hold up," the agent muttered, typing furiously. "System glitch. Just stand to the side, Grandpa." Silas didn't flinch at the nickname. He stepped aside, leaning heavily on his cane. He watched the first-class passengers glide through the priority lane. He saw the way the flight crew greeted them, smiles so bright they looked painful, solicitous nods, offers of pre-flight champagne. Then he saw her, Danica Gray, the purser, the lead flight attendant. She stood at the jet bridge door like Cerberus guarding the underworld. She was striking, with hair pulled back in a bun so tight it pulled her eyes into a permanent glare. Her uniform was tailored to within an inch of its life, and her red lipstick looked like a fresh wound. Silas watched as she greeted a young man in a bespoke suit. Beckett Astor, if Silas recalled the manifest correctly. Astor was a minor tech CEO, the kind with more money than manners. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Astor," Danica cooed, her voice dropping an octave into a sultry purr. "We have your preferred scotch waiting." "Excellent," Astor replied, not even looking at her as he tapped on his phone. Then Silas was cleared. He shuffled toward the gate. As he reached the threshold, Danica blocked his path. She didn't touch him, but her presence was a physical barrier. She looked him up and down, at the scuffed orthopedic shoes, the fraying cardigan, the tired eyes. "Boarding pass," she demanded. "No, sir." No smile. Silas handed it to her. "Zone 5, she said, her voice loud enough for the business-class passengers to hear. "That's all the way in the back. Do not stop in the first-class lavatory. Do not put your bag in the overhead bins up here. Keep moving." "Good afternoon to you, too," Silas said softly. Danica rolled her eyes, turning her back on him to flash a smile at a platinum blonde woman behind him. "Welcome back, Miss Mercer. So good to see you again." Silas walked down the jet bridge. The cold dampness of the tunnel smelled of jet fuel and judgment. He knew the numbers. Etheria Airways was losing money because they had lost their soul. He just hadn't realized the rot had spread to the face of the company. He found his way to 34C. It was a cramped aisle seat near the rear galley. The upholstery was worn, the carpet stained with something dark and sticky. As he struggled to lift his carry-on, a battered leather satchel containing the deed to the airline, into the bin, a large hand grabbed it. "Let me get that for you, sir." Silas turned to see a young flight attendant with messy red hair and a name tag that read, Bryn. She looked exhausted but kind. "Thank you, my dear," Silas smiled. "My shoulders aren't what they used to be." "No trouble at all," Bryn said, securing the bag. "Can I get you some water while we finish boarding? It gets stuffy back here." "That would be lovely." Before Bryn could turn, a sharp voice cut through the hum of the cabin. "Donovan, what are you doing?" Danica was standing at the curtain dividing economy from premium economy. Her face was a mask of irritation. "Just helping a passenger, Danica," Bryn stammered. "We are not in service yet. The VIPs in row 1 need their coats hung. Get to the front. Now." Bryn cast an apologetic look at Silas. "I'm sorry, sir." "Go," Silas whispered. "Don't get in trouble on my account." As Bryn rushed off, Silas sank into seat 34C. The seatbelt sign flickered on. He closed his eyes, listening to the cacophony of the cabin, feeling the vibrations of the massive GE-90 engines spinning up. He was the boss. But right now, he was just an old man in the way. The flight pushed back from the gate 20 minutes late. The captain, a voice from the heavens, mumbled something about air traffic control over Pennsylvania, but Silas knew the truth. He had been timing the ground operations. The baggage handlers were slow because they were understaffed. The fueling truck had arrived late. The inefficiency was bleeding millions. But the real problem was inside the metal tube. Once they reached cruising altitude, the service began. Or rather, the service began for the front of the plane. In the back, the carts were slow to roll out. Silas watched the crew. There was a male attendant, Declan Whitmore, who moved with the swagger of a bouncer rather than a server. He was tall, thick-necked, and clearly Danica's enforcer. When the cart finally reached row 34, Silas was parched. He needed to take his blood pressure medication. "Excuse me," Silas said as Declan breezed past, focused on selling a set of duty-free headphones to the window seat. Declan didn't stop. "Excuse me, young man," Silas said louder this time. Declan stopped the cart and sighed, a heavy, theatrical exhalation. He turned slowly. "Yes? I need some water, room temperature if possible, for my medication." Declan looked at the stack of plastic cups. "We're doing beverage service in 10 minutes. You can wait." "I'm afraid I'm a bit overdue," Silas said, his voice steady. "It would only take a moment." "Sir, if I give you water now, I have to give everyone water now. It's policy." Declan's eyes were cold, dead things. "Is it?" Silas asked. "I wasn't aware Etheria Policy 44B regarding hydration prohibited individual service for medical necessity." Declan blinked. The specific citation of the rulebook confused him for a second, but his arrogance quickly overrode his caution. "Look, Pop, sit tight. You'll get your drink when everyone else does." He shoved the cart forward, catching Silas's knee with the metal edge. Silas winced, gripping his kneecap. The pain was sharp, electric. From across the aisle, a woman with blue hair and a nose ring leaned over. This was Isla Mercer. She had a phone in her hand scrolling through TikTok, but she had paused. "That was messed up," she whispered. "You want my water? I haven't opened it." Silas looked at her, touched. "Thank you, miss, but I'll be fine. I prefer to see how this plays out." Isla frowned, not understanding, but she kept her phone in her hand. 10 minutes later, Bryn Donovan appeared. She was holding a bottle of Evian, the good stuff from first class, and a napkin. She crouched down in the aisle, trying to be invisible. "Here," she whispered, slipping the bottle into his hand. "Don't let Danica see. It's from the captain's stash." Silas took the bottle. "You're a good woman, Bryn. How long have you worked here?" 6 months, she said, checking over her shoulder. It's a lot harder than I thought." "It shouldn't be," Silas said. "Hospitality is about dignity, yours and theirs." "Yeah, well," Bryn gave a weak smile. "Tell that to Danica. She says hospitality is about who pays the most per square inch of seat." "Does she now?" Silas unscrewed the cap. "Interesting philosophy." Suddenly, the intercom dinged. "Flight attendants, prepare for turbulence." The seatbelt sign flashed, but the air was smooth. Silas looked out the window. Clear skies. Then Danica marched down the aisle. She wasn't checking seatbelts. She was looking at a tablet, her face set in a grim line. She was followed by Declan. They stopped at row 34. "Sir," Danica said, her voice loud and sharp, "we have a problem with your ticket." Silas capped the water. "I assure you I paid for it, full fare." "It's not about payment," Danica lied smoothly. "We have a weight and balance issue in the rear cargo hold. We need to redistribute weight. And we have a security conflict regarding your seating assignment." It was nonsense. Pure, unadulterated aviation jargon salad. Silas knew exactly what was happening. He peered past Danica's hip and saw a young man in a hoodie standing nervously in the galley, tapping on a phone. He recognized him. It was a minor social media influencer who had been tweeting about being stuck on standby. Danica was clearing a seat for a friend, or perhaps someone who had bribed her. "I'm not moving," Silas said. "Excuse me?" Danica bristled. "I said, I am not moving. I am an elderly man with a heart condition. I am settled. There are plenty of empty seats in business class if you need to move someone." "Those seats are for paying customers," Danica snapped. "You are in economy basic. You have the lowest priority status on this flight. Now get up, or we will have a problem." "We already have a problem, Ms. Gray," Silas said, his voice dropping to a low rumble. "You just don't know the magnitude of it yet." The cabin had gone quiet. The hum of the engines seemed to fade into the background, replaced by the crackling static of tension. Passengers in the surrounding rows lowered their books and paused their movies. Isla Mercer across the aisle held her phone up. The red record circle was pulsing. "Sir, this is a federal aircraft." Declan stepped in, flexing his arms, the fabric of his uniform straining. "Disobeying a crew member's instruction is a felony. Do you want to go to jail in London, or do you want to walk to the front of the plane where we have a jump seat available?" "A jump seat?" Silas laughed, a dry, incredulous sound. "You want me to sit on a fold-out chair for 7 hours so you can seat that boy in the galley?" He pointed his cane at the influencer, who quickly looked away. "Put the cane down!" Declan shouted, acting as if Silas had pulled a knife. "He has a weapon!" "It's a walking stick, you moron!" a man in row 35 shouted. "Leave the old guy alone!" "Quiet!" Danica spun around, her eyes wild. She was losing control of the cabin, and for a control freak like Danica, that was the ultimate sin. She needed to assert dominance, immediately. "Declan, remove him! He is a security risk!" "Danica, no!" Bryn rushed up from the back. "He's 70 years old. You can't just—" "Shut up, Donovan! Go to the galley or you're fired!" Danica screamed. Bryn froze, tears welling in her eyes. But she didn't leave. She stood her ground, trembling. Declan didn't hesitate. He lunged into the row. The space was too tight for his bulk, so he grabbed the first thing he could reach, Silas's arm. "Get up!" Declan yanked. Silas winced as his shoulder popped. "I told you no!" "I said get up!" Declan grabbed Silas by the lapels of his vintage cardigan. The wool stretched. Silas grabbed the armrests, his knuckles turning ash gray. He wasn't a weak man. He had built an empire from digging foundations in the dirt, but against a 30-year-old weightlifter, he was outmatched. "Help!" Silas shouted, looking around. "Help me!" Two male passengers stood up, but Danica blocked the aisle. "Sit down! Federal regulations! Anyone who interferes will be arrested upon landing. Sit down!" The threat of arrest paralyzed the cabin. Fear is a potent silencer. Declan hauled Silas out of the seat. Silas's foot caught on the metal leg of the chair. He tumbled into the aisle, hitting the floor hard. His glasses skittered across the carpet. "Get your hands off me!" Silas screamed. "You are disrupting the flight!" Danica yelled, playing to the audience she thought was on her side. "Restrain him, Declan!" Declan grabbed Silas's ankles. "No, please!" Silas gasped. The wind knocked out of him. His chest tightened. The stress was hitting his heart. You own nothing!" Danica spat. "You are a disruption!" Declan began to drag him. Silas clawed at the carpet. His cardigan bunched up around his armpits, exposing his dress shirt and the suspenders underneath. He felt the friction burn against his back. He was being dragged like a carcass. "Stop it! Oh my God, stop it!" Isla Mercer was screaming now, her phone camera steady on the horrific scene. Declan didn't stop. He dragged Silas past row 30, past row 20. Silas's head bumped against the plastic molding of a seat leg. A trickle of blood ran down his temple. Silas looked up at the faces of the passengers. Horror, disgust, fear. He saw a child crying, burying her face in her mother's chest. He felt a strange clarity amidst the pain. He wasn't just a passenger anymore. He was the evidence. They reached the curtain of first class. Declan yanked it open and hauled Silas through, dumping him on the floor at the feet of the wealthy elite. Beckett Astor, the tech CEO in 1A, looked down from his champagne. He frowned, not in sympathy but in annoyance. "What is this?" Astor asked, wrinkling his nose. "I thought first class was supposed to be private." Danica stepped over Silas's prone body, straightening her skirt. She was breathing hard, her face flushed with the adrenaline of power. "Apologies, Mr. Astor," she said, her voice shaking slightly but regaining that customer service veneer. "We had a security threat. We are handling it." Silas rolled onto his side, coughing. He tasted copper. He looked up. His vision was blurry without his glasses, but he saw Danica looming over him like a tower of judgment. "Get the zip ties," Danica ordered Declan. "He stays on the floor until we figure out what to do with him." Silas wheezed, his hand shaking as he reached into his pocket. He wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was reaching for his phone. He needed to make a call. Not to the police, to the board of directors. But before he could grasp the device, Declan stomped on his wrist. Crack! Silas cried out, a sound of pure agony, and darkness began to encroach on the edges of his vision. "No phones," Declan sneered. As Silas drifted toward unconsciousness, the last thing he saw was the flashing red light of the fasten seatbelt sign, mocking him. He had built this airline to connect people. Now it was tearing him apart. But Danica and Declan had made one fatal miscalculation. They assumed the old man in the cardigan was nobody. They didn't know that the plane, the fuel, the seats, and their very salaries belonged to him. And Silas Waverly was a man who always collected his debts. The atmosphere in the first-class cabin was hermetically sealed, scented with lavender and money. But on the floor of the forward galley, just behind the cockpit, the air smelled of stale coffee and pain. Silas Waverly sat slumped against a metal cart, his wrists bound tightly with plastic zip ties. The circulation to his hands was slowing, his fingers tingling with a dangerous numbness. His wrist throbbed where Declan had stomped on it. A hairline fracture, perhaps, or a severe bone bruise. But the physical pain was secondary to the humiliation. He closed his eyes, listening to the clinking of silverware. On the other side of the curtain, Danica was serving the soup course. Lobster bisque. He knew the menu because he had approved the catering budget 3 days ago. "More champagne, Mr. Astor?" he heard her ask, her voice sickeningly sweet. "Please," Beckett Astor replied. "And can you do something about the situation? It's rather unsightly having a vagrant in the galley." "My apologies, sir. We're keeping him contained until authorities meet us in London. He won't bother you again." Silas grit his teeth, contained, like a rabid dog. Back in row 34, a different kind of containment was failing. Isla Mercer sat with her phone hidden beneath a blanket. Her hands were shaking. She had just swiped her credit card for the exorbitant $29.99 in-flight Wi-Fi package. The upload bar on TikTok crawled forward. 98%, 99%, posted. She had captioned it simply, "Etheria Airways just beat up an old man for no reason. I'm shaking. #justice. For seat 34. See #Etheria Airways #assault Isla refreshed the page. 10 views. She refreshed again. 500 views. A minute later, 12,000 views. The algorithm had grabbed it. The brutality of the video, the sound of Silas's body hitting the floor, the tear in his cardigan, the sheer arrogance of Danica pointing her finger, was visceral. It was rage bait of the highest order. Comments flooded in faster than she could read them. "OMFG, did he just stomp on his hand? Who is that flight attendant? I want her name now. I'm canceling my flight for tomorrow. This is disgusting. Wait. Does anyone else think that old guy looks familiar?" Bryn Donovan, the young flight attendant with the red hair, slipped into the galley. She looked terrified. She held a small bag of crushed ice wrapped in a linen napkin. "Sir," she whispered, kneeling beside Silas. I brought this for your wrist." Silas looked up, his eyes glassy. "Thank you, child. You shouldn't be here. She'll fire you." "Let her," Bryn said, her voice trembling but defiant. She gently placed the ice on his swelling wrist. "This isn't right. I don't care what the policy is. This isn't human." "What's your name again?" Silas asked, his voice raspy. Bryn Donovan." "Bryn," Silas repeated, committing it to memory. "When the dust settles, remember that you were the only light in this darkness." Suddenly, the curtain whipped open. Declan stood there, looming large. "Get away from him, Donovan!" Declan barked. Bryn jumped up, backing away. "He's injured, Declan. Look at his wrist." "He's a prisoner," Declan sneered. He looked down at Silas with pure contempt. "You comfortable down there, Pop? Maybe next time you'll listen when your betters tell you to move." Silas looked Declan dead in the eye. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "My betters?" Silas chuckled darkly. "Son, you have no idea who is sitting on this floor. You think this uniform gives you power? It gives you a service role. You have mistaken servitude for authority, and that is a very expensive mistake." "Shut up," Declan kicked the sole of Silas's shoe. "You talk too much for a guy in cuffs." "And you," Silas said softly, "don't think enough for a man with a mortgage." Declan bristled, raising a hand as if to strike again, but the intercom chimed 3 times, the signal for a call from the flight deck. Declan glared at Silas, then turned to grab the handset. "Yeah, Captain?" Silas couldn't hear the captain's voice, but he saw the color drain from Declan's face. The swagger evaporated, replaced by a sudden clammy pallor. Yes, sir. We had a situation. A passenger became belligerent. We restrained him." Declan paused, listening. "Viral? What do you mean, viral?" Silas smiled. The digital wildfire had reached the cockpit. Captain Marcus Sterling was a 20-year veteran of the skies. He had flown through hurricanes, engine failures, and medical emergencies, but he had never received a ACARS message like the one flashing on his flight management display. Urgent. OPS director to cockpit. Sat phone. Priority 1. Immediate. Sterling put on his headset and dialed the secure line to Etheria's operations center in Atlanta. "This is Captain Sterling, AE-409. Go ahead." "Marcus." The voice on the other end wasn't the usual dispatcher. It was the VP of operations. His voice was tight, bordering on panic. "Who the hell is on your plane?" "Excuse me?" Sterling asked, confused. "I have 240 passengers. We're cruising at 38,000 feet. Everything is normal." "Everything is not normal, Marcus. CNN just interrupted their broadcast. Twitter is melting down. There is a video of your lead flight attendant dragging an elderly black man down the aisle by his ankles. Tell me right now. Did that happen?" Sterling felt a cold pit open in his stomach. He looked at his first officer, who was scrolling through his phone with a look of horror. "Captain?" the first officer whispered, turning the screen toward him. There it was. Danica screaming, Declan hauling the man like luggage, the crack of the wrist stomp. "Oh, God," Sterling breathed. "Ops, I was told we had a security threat. Purser Gray told me a passenger in 34C was violent and refused to follow crew instructions." "The passenger in 34C," the VP roared through the headset, "is Silas Waverly." Sterling froze. The name hung in the air like a lightning strike. "Waverly? As in the hostile takeover?" "As in the man who owns the company, Marcus. He owns the plane you're flying. He owns the fuel burning in your engines, and your crew just assaulted him on live stream." The blood rushed from Sterling's head. He felt dizzy. I didn't know. The manifest just said S. Waverly. No VIP tag, no special handling. Because he was auditing us incognito, you fool. And you just failed the audit in the most spectacular way possible. Listen to me very carefully. You are to land that plane. Do not divert. If you divert, it looks like an admission of guilt. Get to Heathrow. Police are being notified. And Marcus, if that man has so much as a scratch on him, don't bother coming to the debrief. Just mail in your wings. The line clicked dead. Sterling sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the avionics the only sound. "Captain?" the first officer asked. "What do we do?" "Get Gray up here," Sterling said, his voice deadly quiet. "Now." 2 minutes later, Danica entered the cockpit. She looked annoyed at being summoned. "Captain, I'm in the middle of meal service. That disruption in the back put us behind schedule and—" "Sit down, Danica," Sterling said without turning around. Danica paused. The tone wasn't right. "Excuse me?" "I said sit down." Sterling spun his chair around. He held up the first officer's iPad. The video was paused on a frame of her face, twisted in rage, pointing her finger. Danica's eyes widened, then narrowed. "Oh, that. Someone filmed it? Good. It shows we followed protocol. He was non-compliant. I authorized a removal." "Protocol?" Sterling stood up. He was not a tall man, but in the cramped cockpit he loomed over her. "You think protocol involves dragging a 70-year-old man by his feet? You think protocol involves stomping on a restrained passenger?" "He was resisting," Danica argued, her voice shrill. "He was a threat to the safety of the flight." "The only threat on this flight is you," Sterling spat. "Do you know who that man is? He's a nobody. Some senile old guy in 34C who thinks he owns the place." "He does own the place, Danica," Sterling screamed, losing his composure. "That is Silas Waverly, the new owner of Etheria Airways. You just assaulted your boss." The silence that followed was absolute. Danica stared at him. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again. The arrogance that had armored her for hours began to crack. A hairline fracture of realization. "No," she whispered. That's not possible. He was wearing a thrift store cardigan. He was in economy. It was a test, Sterling said, sinking back into his chair, rubbing his temples. And you failed. Get out of my cockpit. Go back there, cut those zip ties, and pray to whatever God you believe in that he doesn't press charges. Though knowing who he is, charges are the least of your worries. Danica stumbled out of the cockpit. Her legs felt like jelly. She walked back into the first-class galley. Declan was leaning against the counter, eating a bread roll. Captain happy? Danica looked at Declan. She looked at Silas, who was still on the floor, eyes closed, nursing his wrist. She looked at the vintage cardigan, and for the first time she saw the quality of the cashmere. She saw the Patek Philippe watch on his wrist, scuffed, yes, but unmistakably worth more than her entire year's salary. Declan, she croaked, cut him loose. What? Why? He's dangerous. Cut him loose, Danica shrieked, hysteria taking over. Right now! The remaining 4 hours of the flight were a slow-motion funeral procession. Declan had cut the zip ties, muttering curses, but he didn't offer an apology. He was too stupid, or perhaps too proud, to understand the gravity of the situation. He still believed he was right. He had followed orders. He had protected the ship. Danica, however, was in a spiral. She tried to offer Silas a seat in business class. Mr. Waverly, she said, her voice trembling, holding out a hot towel with shaking hands. We have a seat available in 4A. It lays flat. Please, let us make you comfortable. Silas didn't take the towel. He stayed in the jump seat in the galley, refusing to move. He looked at her with eyes that were ancient and sad. I am fine where I am, Ms. Gray, he said. I want to experience the full hospitality you offer to your lowest priority guests. Please, sir, it was a misunderstanding. If you had known I was rich, you would have treated me like a human, Silas finished for her. That is the problem, Danica. It shouldn't matter who I am. He turned his head away, dismissing her. Danica retreated to the lavatory and vomited. In the cabin, the mood had shifted entirely. The news had spread via the onboard Wi-Fi. Passengers were whispering, looking at the crew with open hostility. Beckett Astor, in seat 1A, was scrolling through his Bloomberg Terminal app on his laptop. The headline was banner-sized. Etheria stock plummets 12% after CEO assaulted on flight. Astor swallowed hard. He looked at the galley where Silas was sitting. He remembered his earlier comment about the vagrant. He remembered Silas being dumped at his feet. Astor unbuckled his seatbelt. He grabbed his bottle of Dom Perignon, unopened, and walked to the galley. Mr. Waverly, Astor said, his voice oozing faux humility. Silas looked up. Mr. Astor, I just wanted to say this is terrible. Just terrible. I had no idea. If I can do anything, I have a car waiting at Heathrow. My driver can take you anywhere. Silas looked at the expensive champagne bottle, then at Astor's fearful face. You watch them drag me, Mr. Astor. You stepped over my body to get to the lavatory. You asked them to remove the unsightly debris. I was confused. It was chaotic. Save your champagne, Silas said, and sell your Etheria stock. It's going to be a rough week. Astor paled and retreated to his seat. Finally, the announcement came. Cabin crew, prepare for landing. The plane descended through the thick London fog. As the wheels touched the tarmac, there was no applause, no relief, just a heavy, suffocating dread hanging over the crew. The plane taxied for a long time. It didn't go to a normal gate. It taxied to a remote stand, far away from the terminal. Through the window, Silas saw them. Blue lights, dozens of them. Police cars, vans, and black SUVs with tinted windows. A mobile staircase was being driven up to the plane. Danica stood by the door, smoothing her skirt, checking her makeup in a compact mirror. She was deluding herself. She thought maybe, just maybe, if she explained it right, if she cried a little, it would be okay. The captain came out of the cockpit. He didn't look at his crew. He opened the main cabin door. The cool, damp London air rushed in. 2 officers in high-visibility jackets ascended the stairs. Behind them was a tall woman in a sharp gray suit, flanked by 2 men who looked like corporate lawyers. Danica stepped forward. "Officers, thank God you're here. We had an unruly passenger who—" The lead officer ignored her completely. He walked past her, scanning the galley. "Mr. Waverly?" the officer said, his tone respectful. Silas slowly stood up from the jump seat, leaning heavily on his cane. "I am here." "Sir, are you injured? Do you require a paramedic?" "I'll survive," Silas said. The woman in the gray suit stepped forward. It was Eleanor Vance, the general counsel for Waverly Dynamics. She looked furious. "Silas," she said, her voice tight. "We saw the video. The board is in emergency session." "Good," Silas said. He limped toward the door. "Wait!" Danica cried out, realizing the narrative was slipping away from her. "He assaulted us! He violated federal aviation regulations!" Silas stopped at the top of the stairs. He turned around slowly. The wind caught the torn fabric of his cardigan. He looked at Danica, then at Declan, who was cowering by the drink cart. "Officers," Silas said, his voice carrying over the wind, "I would like to file charges. Assault, battery, false imprisonment." He pointed a shaking finger at Declan. "And him. Intentional infliction of bodily harm." "Understood, sir," the officer said. He turned to his partner. "Read them their rights." "What?" Danica gasped as the officer pulled out a pair of handcuffs. "You can't arrest me! I'm the purser! I'm in charge of this aircraft!" "Not anymore, love," the officer said, spinning her around and clicking the cuffs onto her wrists. Declan tried to bolt. He made a move toward the emergency exit on the other side. "Don't even think about it!" the second officer shouted, drawing a taser. Declan froze, raising his hands. The bully was gone. Only a coward remained. Silas watched as they were led down the stairs, the flashing blue lights illuminating their shame. But the story wasn't over. The rot in the company went deeper than 2 bad apples, and Silas Waverly was just getting started with his cleaning. He turned to the lawyer. "Eleanor, get the car. We're going to the London headquarters. I want a board meeting in 1 hour." "Silas, you need a doctor," Eleanor argued. "I need a boardroom," Silas corrected. "And bring that young flight attendant, the redhead, Bryn." "Why?" "Because," Silas said, looking back into the plane where Bryn was watching with wide eyes. "I need to promote someone." The boardroom of Etheria Airways' European headquarters in London was a masterpiece of corporate intimidation. Located on the 45th floor of the Shard, it offered a panoramic view of the Thames and the city lights below. The table was mahogany, long enough to seat 20, and polished to a mirror shine. At 11 p.m., 12 men and women sat around it. They were the regional directors, the VP of Customer Experience, and the Chief Operating Officer. They wore suits that cost more than most people's cars. They looked annoyed at being called in so late. "This is ridiculous," the COO, a man named Sterling Vance, no relation to the captain, muttered, checking his Rolex. "Where is this new owner? We have a merger to finalize in the morning." "The rumor is he was on flight 409, the VP of Marketing whispered. "Something about a delay." The double doors swung open. The room went silent. But it wasn't a reverent silence. It was a confused one. Silas Waverly walked in. He was not wearing the bespoke suit they expected of a billionaire. He was wearing a torn, dirty cardigan. His shirt was untucked and blood-stained. His right wrist was wrapped in a crude bandage of linen napkins and duct tape, a temporary fix from the paramedics before he refused the hospital. He leaned heavily on his cane, his limp pronounced. Behind him walked Eleanor Vance, his lawyer, and Bryn Donovan. Bryn was still in her uniform, looking terrified, clutching her red flight attendant bag like a shield. "Who are you?" the COO demanded, standing up. "Security. How did this homeless man get in here?" Silas didn't answer. He walked to the head of the table. The walk took a long time. The click of his cane on the marble floor was the only sound in the room. He reached the chair, the chairman's chair. He didn't sit. He stood, gripping the leather backrest with his good hand. "I," Silas said, his voice raspy but filling the room, "am the man who signs your checks." The COO blinked. "Mr. Waverly? You expected a suit," Silas said. "Instead, you get the reality of your product." He gestured to the large screen on the wall. "Eleanor, play it." Eleanor connected her tablet. The video from Isla Mercer's TikTok began to play. The sound was amplified by the boardroom's surround sound system. The scream, "Get your filthy hands off me," echoed off the glass walls. The thud of the body, the crack of the wrist. The executives watched. Some gasped. Others looked away. The COO went pale. When the video ended, Silas turned to the room. "That," Silas pointed a trembling finger at the screen, "is not an accident. That is a culture. You built this. You built the incentives that made Danica Gray think she was a god. You built the policies that made Declan Whitmore think violence was efficiency." "Mr. Waverly," the COO stammered, sweating. "This is obviously a rogue crew. We will terminate them immediately. We will issue a press release." "A rogue crew?" Silas laughed, a dry, bitter sound. "No. They were doing exactly what you trained them to do. Prioritize the elite, dehumanize the economy, treat profit as the only metric of success." Silas reached into his pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. It was the in-flight menu. "I approved a budget for lobster bisque in first class," Silas said softly. "And yet, in economy, I was denied water for my medication because it was against policy to open the cart early." He threw the menu on the table. "You," Silas pointed at the COO. "You're fired. You can't do that. I have a contract. I have a golden parachute." "My lawyers are currently finding the gross negligence clause in that contract," Silas said. "You allowed a culture of toxicity to fester. You are gone, without the parachute." He pointed to the VP of Customer Experience. "You, the one who implemented the compliance bonus for crews who turn planes around fastest. You incentivized them to treat humans like cargo. You're fired." He went down the line. 5 executives, the architects of Etheria's soul rot, gone in 5 minutes. The room was decimated. The survivors stared at the table, afraid to breathe. "This company is dying," Silas said, his voice dropping. "Not because of fuel prices, but because it has forgotten that it carries mothers, fathers, soldiers, and dreamers. It carries people." He turned to Bryn, who was standing in the corner, trying to be invisible. "Come here, child," Silas said gently. Bryn walked forward, her legs shaking. "This," Silas put a hand on her shoulder, "is Bryn Donovan. She has been with us for 6 months. Today she risked her job to bring ice to an old man she thought was a nobody. She stood between a bully and his victim." Silas looked at the remaining board members. "Effective immediately, Ms. Donovan is the new Chief Culture Officer of Etheria Airways." The room erupted. "She's a flight attendant," one director protested. "She has no degree, no experience." "She has the only experience that matters," Silas roared, slamming his cane on the floor. "She knows what it feels like to be human. She will report directly to me. Every policy, every training manual, every script passes through her. If she says it lacks empathy, it dies." Silas looked at Bryn. "Will you help me fix this broken thing, Bryn?" Bryn looked at the billionaires in their suits. She looked at Silas, the billionaire in the torn cardigan. She took a deep breath. "Yes, sir," she whispered. "But we're getting rid of the lobster bisque. It smells terrible in the galley." Silas smiled for the first time that day. "Done." 3 months later. The Old Bailey, Central Criminal Court of England and Wales. The atmosphere outside the historic courthouse was electric, a frenetic circus of flashing bulbs and shouting voices. It wasn't just local news, it was CNN, BBC World, Al Jazeera. The story of the billionaire in 34C had transcended a simple assault case. It had become a global referendum on class warfare and corporate cruelty. Crowds of supporters lined the streets, held back by metal barricades. They waved placards that read, "Justice for Silas," "Dignity has no price," and "Ground the bullies." Inside courtroom number 1, the air was heavy with the scent of polished wood and old law. Danica Gray sat in the defendant's glass-enclosed dock. She was unrecognizable from the polished, imperious figure she had been at 30,000 feet. Her signature bun was gone, replaced by limp, unwashed hair that hung like curtains around a gaunt, pale face. She wore a simple gray blouse, and her hands trembled constantly in her lap. Next to her sat Declan Whitmore. The enforcer had shrunk. Without his uniform, without the altitude to give him authority, he looked like a frightened child in a man's body. He stared at his shoes, refusing to look at the gallery. The prosecution called their star witness, Isla Mercer. Isla took the stand, her blue hair bright against the somber courtroom. She was nervous, but when she looked at Danica, her expression hardened into steel. "Miss Mercer," the Crown prosecutor, a sharp woman named Regina Holt, began. "Can you tell the court what you saw on flight AE 409? "I saw a power trip," Isla said, her voice projecting clearly into the silence. "I saw Mr. Waverly ask for water. Just water. And that man," she pointed a shaking finger at Declan, "kicked his knee. Then, when Mr. Waverly refused to move for a VIP who didn't exist, Mrs. Gray ordered the assault." "Did Mr. Waverly fight back?" "No," Isla said, fighting back tears. "He begged. He said, 'I paid for this ticket.' He held on to his seat because he was terrified. And they dragged him. They dragged him like he was garbage." The video was played again. The scream, "Get your filthy hands off me!" echoed through the courtroom. Every time the thud of Silas's body hitting the floor played, Danica flinched. The jury, 12 ordinary citizens, looked from the screen to the defendants with open disgust. Then came the cross-examination. Danica's defense attorney, a high-priced lawyer paid for by her dwindling savings, tried to paint Silas as the aggressor. "Ms. Gray," the lawyer asked Danica when she took the stand, "did you feel threatened by the passenger in 34C? Danica gripped the railing of the witness box. He was non-compliant. The manual says non-compliance is a precursor to violence. I had to protect the flight deck." "Protect the flight deck from a 70-year-old man with a cane?" Prosecutor Holt countered on cross-examination. She walked slowly toward Danica, like a predator circling prey. "You claimed there was a weight and balance issue. Was there?" I thought there might be," Danica stammered. "The flight logs show the cargo hold was at 60% capacity. The weight distribution was perfect. You lied, didn't you, Ms. Gray? You wanted his seat for a friend." "It was a stressful situation," Danica cried out, her composure cracking. "You don't understand the pressure we are under. If we don't turn the plane around, we lose our bonuses." "So you assaulted a man for a bonus?" Holt asked quietly. The silence that followed was deafening. Danica opened her mouth, but no words came out. She had trapped herself. No further questions. Declan's testimony was even worse. He tried to claim he slipped and accidentally stepped on Silas's wrist. But the forensic medical report detailing the precise, crushing force required to fracture the scaphoid bone destroyed that lie in seconds. The jury deliberated for less than 45 minutes. When they returned, they didn't look at the defendants. "Guilty," the foreman read, "on all counts. Assault occasioning actual bodily harm, false imprisonment, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The judge, Justice Sterling, an ironic coincidence that was not lost on the press, lowered his spectacles. He looked at the pair with a gaze that withered them. "Danica Gray," he began, his voice grave. "You were given authority to ensure safety. Instead, you weaponized it to enforce a petty hierarchy. You stripped a man of his dignity because you believed he was beneath you. That is not just a crime, it is a moral failing of the highest order. I sentence you to 2 years in prison." Danica let out a guttural sob, her legs giving way. She grabbed the edge of the dock, wailing, "No! Please, I have a life, I'm sorry." "Declan Whitmore," the judge continued, ignoring her hysterics. "You acted as a brute enforcer. You enjoyed the violence. I saw it in the video. You smiled when you dragged him. I sentence you to 3 years in prison." Declan closed his eyes, a single tear tracking through the stubble on his cheek. The bailiffs moved in, handcuffing them. As they were led away, the courtroom doors opened. The paparazzi flashbulbs exploded like a lightning storm. Danica tried to hide her face, but there was nowhere to go. Her image, crying, handcuffed, broken, was instantly beamed to millions of screens. But the karma went deeper than prison walls. Outside the court, the public verdict had already destroyed what was left of their lives. Danica's fiancé, a junior investment banker who cared deeply about optics, had broken up with her via text message the day the video went viral. He had already sold an exclusive interview to a tabloid titled, "I Didn't Know I Was Dating a Monster." Her friends had scrubbed her from their social media feeds. She had been doxxed, her address leaked, her parents harassed. She was not just a criminal, she was a pariah. Declan, the man who prided himself on being an alpha, found that his gym membership was revoked. His landlord had evicted him, and his name was now a shorthand for toxic masculinity. Silas sat in the front row of the gallery, watching the scene unfold. He was wearing a sharp navy suit now, his wrist still in a support brace. Next to him was Bryn, looking poised in a business blazer, holding a notebook. Danica, as she was dragged toward the holding cells, locked eyes with Silas one last time. She mouthed the word, "Sorry." Silas didn't smile. He didn't nod. He simply watched her go, his face an unreadable mask of calm. He held no hate in his heart, only a heavy pity. She had traded her freedom for a moment of power, and the exchange rate had been devastating. "It's over," Bryn whispered, her hand resting gently on his arm. "No," Silas said, standing up and turning his back on the weeping defendants. "Justice is done, but the work is just beginning." 1 year later, JFK Terminal 4 had been transformed. The harsh fluorescent lights were replaced with warm, ambient LEDs. The sterile white walls were now adorned with murals of clouds and diverse faces. Silas Waverly stood at the check-in counter. He wasn't flying today. He was watching. The line for economy moved briskly. Agents were smiling, genuine smiles, not the rictus masks of fear they used to wear. They were empowered to waive fees, to help families, to be human. "Mr. Waverly!" Silas turned. Bryn Donovan was walking toward him. She looked older, wiser, but her red hair was still messy, a trademark she refused to change. She held a tablet. "The numbers are in for Q3, she said, beaming. "Customer satisfaction is up 40%. On-time departures are up 15%. And the stock? Well, the stock is higher than it was before the takeover." "And the crew morale?" Silas asked. "Highest in the industry," Bryn said. "We implemented that new rule, the dignity protocol. If a passenger is distressed, the crew is authorized to pause service and help, regardless of class. It's working, Silas. It's actually working." Silas patted her arm. "I knew it would. Treating people well is a good business model. Who knew?" He looked out at the tarmac. Etheria jets were lining up for takeoff. They looked the same on the outside, sleek silver tubes, but inside they were different. "I'm retiring, Bryn," Silas said suddenly. Bryn stopped tapping on her tablet. "What? You can't. We're just getting started." "I'm 73, Silas chuckled. "My wrist still aches when it rains. I've done what I came to do. I cleaned the house. Now I need someone to live in it." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I'm not proposing," he joked. Bryn opened it. Inside was a pin. It was gold, in the shape of the Etheria wings, but in the center was a small ruby heart. "The CEO pin," Bryn whispered. "Silas, I'm 26. I was a flight attendant a year ago." "And you are the best executive I have ever met," Silas said firmly. "You have the heart, Bryn. The business can be taught. The heart cannot." He pointed to the departures board. Flight AE 409 to London was boarding. "Take the reins, kid," Silas said. "Fly us somewhere good." Silas turned and walked toward the exit. He didn't have his cane today. He walked slowly, but upright. He walked out of the terminal into the bright New York sunlight, a man who had been dragged through the darkness and came out the other side carrying a torch. Bryn watched him go. She pinned the golden wings to her lapel. She took a deep breath, keyed her radio, and spoke to the thousands of employees across the globe. "This is Donovan. Let's get to work." The story of Silas Waverly is a brutal reminder that character is not defined by the seat number on your ticket, but by how you treat the person sitting next to you. Danica and Declan saw an old man in a cheap cardigan and saw a target. Bryn saw a human being and saw a duty. In a world that is increasingly automated and stratified, the simple act of kindness is a revolutionary act. Silas didn't just reclaim his airline, he reclaimed the idea that dignity is a universal right, not a luxury add-on. If this story made your blood boil, if it made you cheer for Silas and cry for Bryn, then you know that this isn't just a story about a plane. It's a story about us. Don't let the Danicas of the world win. Be a Bryn. Stand up, speak out, and never, ever judge a book by its cover or a billionaire by his cardigan. Hit that like button if you believe in karma. Share this video to remind the world that respect costs nothing but means everything. And subscribe for more stories where the underdog bites back and justice is served cold at 30,000 feet. Thanks for watching and fly safe.